Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. The UN Security Council will convene on Monday afternoon for an emergency closed-door meeting on Syria. Now, this comes as Syrians around the globe celebrate the ouster of Bashar al-Assad. Now, Russian press agency TASS has reported that Assad left Syria on Sunday and was granted political asylum in Moscow. Now, after 13 years of civil war, Syrians abroad are celebrating following a rebel victory against the Assad regime. Now, demonstrators chanted anti-Assad slogans. They held flags of the Syrian rebels. Now, in the Lebanese capital of Beirut, people could be heard chanting, "As Assad burnt us, he will now burn himself." Syrian rebels swiftly seized Damascus over the weekend, pushing Bashar al-Assad and his family out of the country. U.S. President Joe Biden commented on the developments, commending the rebel forces for overthrowing the dictator, and expressed his hope that this would bring more stability to the region.
We will engage with all Syrian groups, including within the process led by the United Nations, to establish a transition away from the Assad regime toward independent, sovereign, I want to say it again, sovereign Syria, with a new constitution, a new government that serves all Syrians. And this process will be determined by the Syrian people themselves. And the United States will do whatever we can to support them.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has also commented on the collapse of the Syrian government. Now, in his view, the recent events serve as a warning to regimes around the world.
The events in Syria have made the world realize once again, or at least they should, that even the most cruel regime may fall and that Russia and its allies can be defeated.
Now, rebel forces in Syria have managed to topple the country's government, but what happens next is anyone's guess. Now, geopolitics expert Chris Gotowski says it's simply impossible to predict how Syria will be ruled come 2025. Now, let's listen to this clip from TVP World's show Press Corner.
We have to remember that those rebel forces, they were actually affiliated with al-Qaeda in the past, called the al-Nusra Front. Although they split from al-Qaeda, nonetheless, they are Islamic-backed groups. The question is, what kind of rule will be in Syria? We have to remember that Syria is a very, very diverse country with Alawite minority, which was actually ruled by Assad, the majority Sunnis, which are actually by the rebel forces. We have Kurds in the east. That's a big question mark, what's going to happen there, because of the Turkish-Kurdish relationship. We also have the Christian minority also, and the Druze. So it's a jigsaw puzzle, to say the least. So what's going to happen? Well, definitely Russia and Iran are taking a huge, heavy blow in Syria right now. But what's going to happen with the government? That's a big question mark. And only time will tell. But either they could go down the road of being a hardcore Islamist rule in Syria, which I don't think anybody wants, or it could be more of a moderate rule. But I think the next days, weeks, actually even days, are going to be critical.
Now, the full episode of Press Corner is available on our YouTube channel, and we highly recommend you watch it. Thousands of pro-Euro protesters rallied in the capital of Georgia for the 11th consecutive night on Sunday. Now, the demonstrations began after the pro-Western opposition and president refused to recognize the ruling Georgian Dream Party's claimed victory in a parliamentary election in late November, citing widespread irregularities. Now, the fresh wave of protests was triggered by Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze's announcement that the government would postpone accession talks with the European Union until 2028. Now, riot police continue to use tear gas and water cannons to disperse crowds. A Georgian Interior Ministry official Sunday said that 402 protesters had been arrested since November 28th, with more than 30 of them seeing criminal charges. Prime Minister Kobakhidze branded the protesters as opposition-controlled violent groups, called them liberal fascists, and said that their attempted revolution failed. Moving on now to Romania, where the political crisis in the country continues. As the second round of the presidential election was not held and the first round was invalidated by the Constitutional Court, the presidential race will now have to begin from scratch. Now, our reporter Pavel Chaskovsky is on site in Bucharest, and we go live to him right now. Good morning, Pavel. What are the latest developments there in Romania?
Well, it's not only TikTok anymore, but also Facebook. which could have helped sway the results of the first round of presidential elections in Romania. A report has recently been released indicating that an orchestrated campaign was run on Facebook to promote the hard-right candidates, including the surprising winner of the first round of presidential elections, Călin Georgescu, and to attack their pro-European opponents. It is estimated that almost $300,000 were spent on this campaign, and this report adds to the mounting evidence that Călin Georgescu received preferential treatment from TikTok during his presidential campaign, despite exhibiting zero expenses on this campaign. So Georgescu's presidential campaign is under intense authorities' scrutiny at the moment, and over the weekend arrests were made across the country on the basis of voting fraud. But there are lessons learned from this failed attempt to elect the new president in Romania, lessons learned on foreign interference into European elections, on online platforms' influence on them. And there are talks now in Bucharest that prior to the next attempt to elect the new president, a thorough verification of candidates will be held, and some of them might even be barred from running in the elections. Back to you, Diana.
Really goes to show there the power that social media plays here in elections. Thank you, Paweł Trzaskowski from Bucharest. We will be coming back to you throughout the day. 43,000 soldiers is the toll Ukraine has paid in the fight against Russia since the full-scale invasion began. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky shared this staggering figure on Sunday on social media, along with the news that 370,000 have been wounded. Now, as the situation in Ukraine intensifies, the international community is stepping up its efforts. European Council President Antonio Costa is calling on EU leaders to unite at a crucial summit in Brussels on December 19.
This Sunday brought some dramatic news from Ukraine. For the first time, President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died since the beginning of the war in February 2022.
This is what this war is about. It cannot be ended simply with a piece of paper and a few signatures. A ceasefire without guarantees can be reignited at any moment, as Putin has done before. To guarantee that the losses of Ukrainians will no longer continue, we need to ensure reliable peace and not turn a blind eye to occupation.
Ukraine has also seen 370,000 soldiers wounded in the conflict. Despite this, Zelensky highlighted the resilience of the Ukrainian forces, with nearly 50% of those wounded returning to battle. Brussels was also quite active this Sunday, with the new European Council President Antonio Costa calling on EU leaders to unite in his first European Council meeting in Brussels on December 19th. Costa emphasized that the meeting would send a strong message of solidarity with Ukraine, with President Zelensky joining to share the updates of his country's needs.
The situation in Ukraine will be at the forefront of our discussions. I have just returned from a visit to Kyiv on the first day of my mandate. We need to stand with Ukraine for as long as necessary and do whatever it takes for Russia's invasion to be defeated and international law to prevail.
As the situation in both Ukraine and the Middle East continues to evolve, all eyes are on Washington, where the shift in leadership will be pivotal in shaping the next phase of the conflict. For TVP World, I'm Aisha Badge.
Putin will be forced to sit at the negotiating table by the international community. This according to Mariia Mezentseva, the head of the Ukrainian delegation to the Council of Europe. Now, Mezentseva made the claim during a recent interview with TVP World, where she discussed Russia's willingness to enter in negotiations with Ukraine and the West.
Why Putin will be forced to sit at the table? Because the conditions are so for him. He can't, mobilize people not having money, so he motivates them only with money. Our motivation internally in Ukraine still exists, and the morale is very high, regardless how hard it is. I'm coming from the family, half of which is at the front line since 2014, and I must tell you that we are not ready to give up just because Putin is not willing currently to sit at the table. He will be forced to, and I think international community is playing a great part and great role in this, also with what I have outlined: sanctions, more military aid, and he couldn't enter Kyiv within 3 days as he planned. That's very obvious, but we could enter Russia. We are now in the Kursk region. Our army is showing that Russia is not the most powerful, the most, uninvadable country. That was not our idea from the very start, but it shows to international community that Russia can fail.
Authorities in The Hague say the explosion that brought down an apartment building and killed at least 6 people on Saturday could be connected to criminal activities. Now, around 20 people are missing and are believed to be buried beneath the rubble.
Who was behind the explosion of the apartment building in The Hague remains uncertain, but the burned wreckage of a car seems to be the most important clue obtained by the Dutch police.
We've asked the public to report information about a car that drove away at very high speed shortly after the explosion. What caused the explosion is still unknown. What is clear to us is that there are indications that this concerns a crime.
The Hague's chief public prosecutor says the explosion could be connected to organized crime. The Netherlands has experienced a sharp increase in criminal cases in recent years. The number of illegal drug sale cases rose by 2,000 between 2022 and last year. In the early morning of December 7th, residents of The Hague were woken up by a loud explosion.
I heard the first bang just after 6 this morning. I thought it was fireworks.
I saw the whole thing happen. The building collapsed and there was a loud bang. It took a while, but I saw the building collapse in front of my own eyes. It was truly bizarre.
Around 40 residents had to be evacuated from the damaged building, and over 20 people have been reported missing. Speaking to the press, The Hague's mayor Jan van Zanen described their chances of survival as minimal.
It is not known how many people are still under the rubble, but the reality is there is still a very small chance of survival. We are looking at the worst-case scenario.
Saturday's explosion damaged 19 homes and destroyed as many as 5. While the search for missing people continues, residents of the city have set up a fundraising campaign, raising over €250,000 for those affected by the blast.
Creating lavish and ornate nativity scenes is a Krakow Christmas tradition dating back to the 19th century. Now, our reporter Karolina Shaplin is in Krakow at the annual Krakow Nativity Scene competition.
Nothing says more than Christmas is just round the corner than the uniquely Krakow tradition of making Christmas cribs. And we are here in the Krzysztofory Palace, right by the Krakow's main square, just after the announcement of who won the Christmas crib competition. Now, this Christmas competition goes back all the way to World War II, when the first competition was held. And if you ask, what makes Krakow's Christmas cribs so different? Well, it's the fact that not only they depicting the birth of baby Jesus, the 3 wise men, but also they have architectural elements which are a mashup of all of the Krakow's important buildings, such as the Wawel Castle, the Barbican, or the Basilica. So this year there were a record number of entrants, in fact 245, and the main prize went to Mr. Zimmern. And his crib had not just all the usual accoutrements, the baby Jesus, the 3 wise men, but also it had a small mechanical dragon that just moved out of the crib. So the crowds here today give the testament how vital this tradition is to the experience of Krakow Christmas. I'm Karolina Shaplin for TVP World.
And with that Christmas story, we leave you with this edition of TVP World News. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.